It is 4 in the afternoon on a brisk Tuesday. A father stands on the sidelines of a high school soccer field, cheering wildly for his 15-year-old son. He applauds the good plays, chats with other parents, and plays the role of the perfect suburban dad. But back at his 19-room Victorian mansion, his wife, his mother, and his two other children are lying dead in their own blood, arranged meticulously on sleeping bags in the ballroom. And as soon as the referee blows the final whistle, this father is going to drive his son home and shoot him 10 times. You absolutely have to stick around until the very end of this episode because the way this man vanishes for nearly 2 decades and the unbelievable piece of sculpted clay that finally brings him down will leave you speechless. We are Mike and Abby, and welcome to Wild Crime Podcasts. We are officially done with boring, slow burn true crime. We're tearing into the most baffling cases on Earth, untangling the lies, and dropping you right in the middle of the madness.
Whether you are on a long drive, crushing a workout, or just feeling a little bored, we are here to walk you through the mystery and make your next hour incredibly thrilling.
Okay, so we really need to set the scene for this because the geography and the culture of where this happens are totally central to how this bizarre timeline even exists at all.
Yeah, the location is a huge character in this case.
Right. So it is December 7th, 1971 in Westfield, New Jersey. And, this is an affluent, highly manicured commuter suburb.
Oh, absolutely. It's the kind of place where violent crime is like a total statistical anomaly. It's built on that whole promise of post-war American safety and keeping up appearances.
Exactly. And right at the center of this neighborhood sits this property called Breeze Knoll.
Yeah, Breeze Knoll. It's this imposing piece of real estate. I mean, we're talking about a sprawling, decaying 19-room Victorian mansion. It even has this massive Tiffany stained glass skylight.
Which just screams old money.
Right. It was originally built to project immense wealth and stability. But by the first week of December, the neighbors surrounding the house are feeling this creeping, undeniable unease.
Because the house is behaving in a way that defies all logic, right?
Totally. Every single light fixture in that massive mansion is turned on, day and night. And they've been burning constantly for almost a month.
That is just, the electric bill alone, but just visually, that's so eerie.
And the bulbs are literally expiring. The house is slowly going dark, room by room, window by window, as the filaments burn out one after the other.
It creates this hollow, almost jack-o'-lantern effect.
Yes, but nobody has seen a single member of the List family. Not the father, John Amma List, not the wife, Helen, not the 84-year-old grandmother, Alma.
And none of the 3 teenage kids either, right?
Yeah.
Patricia, John Jr., or Frederick. Just a glowing, silent house.
Exactly. And the isolation eventually becomes too glaring to ignore. So on December 7th, the Westfield police are finally dispatched to perform a welfare check.
A welfare check that is going to turn into absolute nightmare fuel.
Oh, without a doubt. They arrive at the estate and immediately find that all the massive wooden doors are completely deadbolted.
Like sealed shut from the inside.
Yeah, sealed tight. So they circle the property and eventually locate an unlocked ground-level window leading into the basement.
Okay.
They pry it open, hoist themselves up, and drop down into the dark.
And the second they hit the floor of that basement, 2 things hit them instantly. I remember reading about this. First, the temperature.
Right, the house is freezing cold.
Yeah, it's artificially chilled way below normal room temperature. And second, there is a haunting sound echoing through the floorboards.
The music.
Yes, it is the sound of religious music like pipe organs and choral hymns playing on a continuous loop from a radio somewhere in the upper levels of the house.
It's so incredibly cinematic, but in the worst possible way. The officers navigate through this freezing, cavernous environment, following the sound of those hymns.
Just shining their flashlights into empty, immaculate rooms.
Right, until they reach the ballroom.
Yeah.
And that is where they find them. Helen, who is 45 years old, Patricia, 16, John Jr., 15, and Frederick, 13.
All just laid out.
Laid out with horrifying precision. They are placed on sleeping bags right on the ballroom floor, arranged neatly. And later, when they search the rest of the house, they find the 84-year-old grandmother, Alma, up in her 3rd-floor attic apartment.
But the patriarch of the family, 46-year-old John Emil List, is completely gone. There is no trace of him.
None.
And the detail that genuinely messes with my head, like I cannot get past this, is what he did before he walked out the door. He systematically walked through all 19 rooms of that mansion, found every single family photograph, every portrait, every candid snapshot, and he took a pair of scissors and meticulously cut his own face out of the pictures.
Which is just, it's a physical deletion of his existence.
Yeah.
He didn't just pack a suitcase and run. He attempted to surgically remove his image from the historical record of that family. He left the bodies, but he took his face.
Wait, hold on. We need to stop right here because the math isn't mathing for me.
What do you mean?
It's a massive Victorian mansion in a rich neighborhood. It's fully illuminated every hour of the day for almost a month. How does the neighborhood just, ignore that?
Right, the 28 days.
Yeah. In a modern suburb, you get a noise complaint if your dog barks twice. How did this go 28 days without a massive police raid?
Well, to understand why the house sat untouched, you really have to look at how List manipulated the environment. This is what investigators call premeditated temporal manipulation.
Okay, that sounds really clinical. What did he actually do?
He didn't just flee.
Huh?
He manufactured a 28-day head start by weaponizing the infrastructure of the 1970s suburb.
How exactly do you weaponize a suburb?
By understanding the mechanics of suburban privacy and exploiting them. In affluent neighborhoods like Westfield, people respect boundaries to a fault.
Like minding your own business taken to the extreme.
Exactly. You don't just go knocking on someone's door without a reason. It is considered incredibly rude to pry. List knew this. But he also knew he had to stop the daily physical interactions that connect a house to the outside world.
Right, the deliveries and stuff.
Yes, before he even pulled the trigger, he had already walked down to the post office and placed a vacation hold on the mail. He contacted the milk delivery service and paused it. He stopped the daily newspaper delivery.
So there is no physical buildup of mail or bottles on the porch to signal that the house is abandoned.
Exactly. He created a completely sterile exterior. But he also had to handle the social obligations, right?
It's schools.
Yeah. He sat down at his desk and forged handwritten notes to the children's schools and to the places where they held part-time jobs.
And what did the notes say?
The letters claimed that the family had to suddenly travel to North Carolina to care for a severely ill relative, and they would be gone for several weeks.
Wow. So he jammed every single gear that would normally trigger an alarm?
He really did. And that freezing temperature inside the house, that wasn't an accident or a broken furnace.
It was deliberate.
Entirely. He intentionally turned the thermostat down to a near-freezing temperature, specifically to slow the biological process of decomposition.
That is so morbid.
He knew that the smell would eventually alert the neighbors, so he basically turned his own home into a temporary morgue to buy himself more time.
Erasing his face from the photos was chilling, but that completely pales in comparison to the timeline of what he actually did that morning, because the sequence of the violence changes everything.
The chronology of November 9th is so essential to understanding his psychology. It wasn't a frenzied massacre at all. It was a staggered, methodical process.
It starts early in the morning, right?
Yeah. He waits until the teenage children leave the house for school. So it is just him, his wife Helen, and his elderly mother Alma in the house.
And Helen is sitting in the kitchen at the table just drinking her morning coffee.
Right. And he walks up behind her with a 9mm Steyr semi-automatic handgun. He raises it and shoots her in the side of the head.
Just no warning.
None. The choice of weapon and the angle are deliberate. He approaches from a blind spot. He eliminates the primary adult obstacle first.
Then he calmly walks up the stairs, navigating this massive house all the way to the third-floor attic apartment.
Where his mother is.
Yeah. His 84-year-old mother, Alma, is still in bed. He walks into her room and shoots her right above the left eye.
By taking out his wife and his mother while the children are at school, he isolates his targets. He essentially breaks the family down into manageable units.
That is so cold.
But what happens next is where the reality of his mindset truly crystallizes. Because he doesn't panic. He doesn't flee in a rush of adrenaline. He spends the next several hours in that house with the bodies, just waiting for the school day to end.
Which is just, I can't even fathom the quiet of that house, just waiting.
Right. And then Patricia, the 16-year-old, and Frederick, the 13-year-old, come home from school first.
They walk through the front door, likely expecting to see their mother or grandmother, completely unaware of what is upstairs and in the kitchen.
And as they enter, he ambushes them. He shoots both of them in the back of the head.
Again, from behind.
Yes. It is a cowardly execution method, but in his mind, he would later rationalize this as being merciful. He claimed he didn't want them to see it coming.
But the timeline completely shatters right here.
It does.
Because after murdering his wife, his mother, and his two youngest children, he walks into the kitchen, the exact same kitchen where his wife was murdered hours earlier, and he makes himself lunch.
Yeah.
He literally prepares a sandwich and eats it.
It is the ultimate display of compartmentalization.
Mm-hmm.
For someone with his psychological profile, the murders weren't an emotional event. They were a completed task on a checklist. Making lunch was just the next logistical step in his day.
If you are watching on YouTube right now, drop a comment. How do you even begin to comprehend the psychology of a man who makes himself a sandwich and runs errands with his family dead in the next room? Because I am totally lost on this one.
It's hard for any normal brain to process.
Hold on. He eats a sandwich, and then he leaves the house. He just walks out the door.
Yep. He leaves the house, gets into his car, and drives to the bank. He walks up to the teller and closes out his bank accounts, as well as his mother's accounts.
Just tying up loose ends.
Exactly. He withdraws the remaining cash, and then he drives to the local high school.
Right. To watch John Jr. play soccer.
Yes.
He stands on the sidelines of a high school sporting event. He is engaging in casual conversation with other suburban parents, applauding the plays, acting like a totally normal, supportive father, all while knowing exactly what is waiting on the sleeping bags back in the ballroom.
He is maintaining the facade of the patriarch right up until the final moment.
But then he drives John Jr. home from the game. They pull up to Breeze Knoll. They walk inside. And this is where the pattern completely fractures.
Because John Jr. doesn't go quietly.
No, he doesn't. With the others, he claimed he shot them from behind so they wouldn't suffer. But John Jr. realizes what is happening. He fights back.
Yeah, there is evidence of a desperate physical struggle in the house.
There is evidence of a misfire from the gun. John Jr. is not killed with a single shot to the back of the head. He is shot 10 times.
The crime scene tells a very different story here. The first 4 murders were executions. The murder of John Jr. was a battle.
And I have to say, I cannot accept the narrative that this was just a cold, calculated, dispassionate hit. Those 10 shots break the pattern entirely. That is pure, unadulterated rage.
Oh, I agree. It totally exposes the lie he told himself.
Yeah.
If we pause the timeline to dissect his mental state, we have to look closely at his immense hubris.
Right, his arrogance.
Exactly. He viewed himself as an administrator of death, like this merciful patriarch sparing his family from a cruel world. He tried to frame the first 4 murders as painless and quick. But John Jr.'s brutal, violent death shatters that illusion completely.
Because John Jr. didn't follow the script.
Exactly. It exposes List as a fragile, retaliatory narcissist. The moment his absolute authority was physically challenged by his teenage son, the facade of the merciful savior dropped, and he snapped.
He didn't just kill his son. He punished him.
Yes, he punished him for fighting for his life. We cannot look at this man as some calculating, cold genius. We have to look at him as an incredibly insecure authoritarian who threw a lethal tantrum when he lost control of his environment.
He spent the rest of the day cleaning up the blood, but we need to talk about the insane, twisted lie he tried to sell to his pastor to justify the slaughter.
Right, because the physical evidence at the scene wasn't just forensic. It included a 5-page handwritten letter left directly on the desk in his den.
Sitting right there for the police to find.
Yes. It was addressed to his Lutheran pastor, Reverend Eugene Rewinkle, and dated November 9th. And the contents of this letter provide a terrifying window into his cognitive distortions.
I read the transcripts of this letter, and it lays out his entire twisted rationale. And when you strip away the flowery language, it really boils down to 2 things: financial ruin and extreme religious zealotry.
Yeah, the money was the main catalyst.
List had been a vice president at a bank, but he had secretly lost his job. He was trying to sell insurance, but making nowhere near enough money to sustain the mortgage on a 19-room mansion.
He was completely underwater.
Right, and he was secretly siphoning his elderly mother's savings account just to keep the lights on and keep up appearances.
He was staring down the barrel of total bankruptcy. And in the letter, he wrote that he was absolutely terrified of the humiliation of going on welfare.
The humiliation, not the struggle, not the hunger, but the embarrassment.
That word is critical. Psychologists who later analyzed List determined he suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, or OCPD. Now, it is crucial to explain the mechanism of this disorder, because it is very different from standard OCD.
Okay, wait, how does OCPD actually work in a case like this?
Standard OCD is what psychologists call ego-dystonic. The person knows their compulsions are irrational, and it causes them immense distress. They don't want to flick the light switch 20 times, but they feel they have to.
Okay, track with that.
OCPD, on the other hand, is egosyntonic. The person believes their strict rules, their rigidity, and their obsession with order are entirely correct.
Oh, wow. So they think everyone else is the problem.
Exactly. They think everyone else is flawed. List was driven by an incredibly strict authoritarian upbringing where outward perfection and male provision were everything. His pride was the foundation of his entire identity.
So his brain literally could not process the concept of failure?
For him, social standing was a matter of life and death. He literally preferred the concept of family annihilation over the social embarrassment of standing in a food stamp line, or admitting to his wealthy Westfield neighbors that he had failed as a provider.
That is so incredibly fragile.
To his rigid mind, death was a cleaner, more orderly solution than poverty.
But he couldn't just write a letter admitting it was all about his fragile ego. He wrapped the entire slaughter in this heavy, twisted theology.
He needed a righteous excuse.
Right. So in the letter to the pastor, he claimed the world was becoming too secular, too evil. He complained that his wife, Helen, who was struggling with physical illness and severe depression, had stopped going to church and wanted her name removed from the congregation rolls.
He was projecting his own failures onto their spiritual status.
He even complained about his teenage daughter. He wrote that Patricia wanted to be an actress, and he genuinely believed that being involved in the theater would corrupt her soul.
It's all about control.
Exactly. He convinced himself that by killing his family right then, while they still had some lingering faith, he was guaranteeing their souls would go to heaven before the world could ruin them.
It is the ultimate rationalization. He couldn't provide for them on earth, so he decided to provide for them in the afterlife by acting as their judge and executioner.
He even mentioned in the letter that he originally planned to execute the murders on November 1st.
Right, All Saints' Day.
Yes. Because November 1st is All Saints' Day, and he thought it was an appropriate day to get to heaven, but his travel plans got delayed, so he had to push it to the 9th.
The chilling casualness of his administrative mindset is summed up perfectly at the very end of the document.
Right. After 5 pages of heavy theological justification and explaining his financial woes, he casually adds a PS to the bottom of the letter.
Like it's an email.
Yeah, he simply notes that he left his mother's body up in the 3rd-floor attic because she was too heavy to move down to the ballroom with the others.
It is pure sociopathic administration. He is literally updating the pastor on the logistics of the corpses.
Pause for a second and ask yourself, if you are watching on YouTube, do you think a man like this ever actually believed his own religious lies? Or was it always just a desperate cover for his massive ego?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Because I have to push back on this whole religious excuse. If you really thought the world was so irredeemably evil, and if heaven was the ultimate glorious goal that he just had to send his family to, why didn't he take his own life too?
Right, why spare himself?
Exactly. Why did he pack a bag? He used religion as a shield for his own cowardice. He wanted them dead so he could escape his financial mess, but he wanted to live.
Well, he viewed suicide as a sin. In his twisted framework, if he committed suicide, he wouldn't go to heaven. But somehow, he justified the mass murder of 5 people as a righteous sacrificial act. The hypocrisy is staggering. He essentially sacrificed his entire bloodline to wipe his financial slate clean, balancing his life like an accountant balances the ledger by eliminating the deficit.
The psychological gymnastics are staggering, but what he did next, how he managed to completely humiliate the federal government for 18 years, is going to make you scream at your speakers.
So when the police finally discovered the bodies on December 7th, a massive nationwide manhunt exploded. They quickly located his car, a green 1963 Chevy Impala.
Where was it?
It was found abandoned in the long-term parking lot at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York.
But the car was a total ghost ship. Investigators dusted the entire vehicle, and it was completely wiped clean of fingerprints.
Not a single smudge.
And when they scoured the flight manifests and interviewed airline staff, there was absolutely zero evidence that John Emil List ever boarded a plane.
He used the airport as a massive decoy. He knew that an abandoned car at an international hub would force the FBI to drain their investigative resources looking into flights to South America, Europe, or anywhere abroad.
So while the federal government is looking for a man fleeing the continent, List had already vanished into the American interior.
He didn't even leave the country.
No. By November 22nd, 1971, while his family was still literally decaying on the ballroom floor back in New Jersey before the police even knew they were dead, he was in Denver, Colorado.
Just starting over.
He was standing in a government office applying for a brand new Social Security number under the assumed name of Robert P. Clark.
which is just wild to think about today.
I know half of you driving right now are screaming at your podcast app, wondering how a guy gets a new social security number and an accounting job while being the most wanted man in America. I totally get it. How does a middle-aged man walk into a government building in 1971 and just say, "Hi, I'm Bob," and get a federal identity?
Well, it exposes a massive blind spot in the infrastructure of the 1970s. We look at this through the lens of modern digitized tracking. But back then, the Social Security system was largely paper-based and highly decentralized.
So they weren't like checking databases.
Cross-referencing was virtually non-existent. You could walk into an office in a different state, fill out a paper form, claim you lost your card or had never been issued one because you worked in an exempt field, and simply request a new one.
Wow.
Without a digitized national database of birth certificates and death records, the clerk simply processed the paperwork.
So he just fabricated Robert P. Clark out of thin air. And this is the part that drives me absolutely insane. He doesn't flee to a remote cabin in the woods. He doesn't cross the border into Mexico. He doesn't join an underground commune.
No, he does none of those things.
He eventually moves to the South, settling down in Midlothian, Virginia, just outside of Richmond, and he rebuilds the exact same life. It is infuriating.
He literally becomes an accountant again. He joins a local Lutheran church again.
He starts coordinating carpools for the local kids. I mean, come on. He eventually meets a woman named Dolores Miller, courts her, and marries her, and she has absolutely no idea that she is sharing a bed with a family annihilator.
He essentially copy-pasted his entire existence into a new zip code.
Let me get this straight. He murdered his family to escape his life, and then he just rebuilt the exact same life.
Yes, and that exposes the core of his pathology. If we break down his psychology during this fugitive period, his defining trait is his complete and utter inability to change.
Right.
We cannot praise his evasion skills. He wasn't some brilliant fugitive outsmarting the authorities with clever tactics. He was a prisoner of his own rigid personality. He couldn't reinvent himself because he had no imagination, no flexibility.
He just went back to the only script he knew.
Exactly. He hid in plain sight by being the most boring, straight-laced, unremarkable man in the room. He survived by weaponizing mediocrity.
Weaponizing mediocrity. That's a great way to put it.
He realized that if you show up to work on time, wear a beige suit, balance the books, and sit quietly in the back pew of the church, society stops looking at you. You become invisible by being mundane.
For almost 2 decades, the trail is ice cold. The FBI has nothing. But a television show and a block of clay are about to tear his fake life straight to the ground.
So it is 1989. 18 years have passed since the murders. A brand new television program called America's Most Wanted has just launched, and they are desperate for compelling cold cases to feature.
Because it's a new show, they need viewers.
Right. And an investigator named Frank Maranca relentlessly pushes the show's producers to feature the John List case.
Yeah.
The producers are incredibly hesitant because the case is nearly 2 decades old. They think it's too cold to generate any real leads.
But they finally agree to air it on May 21st, 1989. But they run into a massive logistical problem.
The photos.
Yes. The only photographs they have of John List are almost 20 years old. And remember, he systematically cut his face out of everything in the house. So investigators only had a few stray, poor-quality images that extended family members or old acquaintances had kept.
Right, they had practically nothing to work with.
To broadcast this to millions of people, they needed to show what he looked like now. So they bring in a man named Frank Bender.
Frank Bender is a fascinating figure in the history of criminal investigation. He was a self-taught forensic sculptor. He had this incredibly rare, almost intuitive talent for what he cheerfully called recomposing the decomposed.
Which is a wild way to describe your job.
It is, but it was accurate. Usually, Bender worked with unidentified skeletal remains. He would measure the tissue depth markers on a skull and build clay over the bone to identify murder victims.
So it was highly anatomical work.
Very much so. But for the John List case, he had to do something entirely different. He had to coax time forward. He had to age progress a living fugitive, adding 18 years of aging to a man whose current face no one had ever seen.
So Bender gets to work on this block of clay. And he doesn't just look at the bone structure and guess the physical aging. He doesn't just add wrinkles. He uses intense psychological profiling to dictate the physical form.
Yeah, he gets into the mind of the subject.
Right. He creates this bust and he gives it fleshy jowls, a severely receding hairline, and slightly sagging skin. But then he makes the ultimate masterstroke. He leaves his studio, goes down to an antique thrift store, buys a pair of thick, black-rimmed, outdated 1950s glasses, and places them right on the clay bust's
And
face.
that decision was pure psychological deduction. Bender realized that a man as rigid, as obsessively conservative and arrogant as John List would never update his style.
He would hate the 80s.
Exactly. He would view modern 1980s fashion as frivolous or undisciplined. He would unconsciously cling to the aesthetic of the 50s and 60s because those were his successful years before his life fell apart and he lost his bank job.
So Bender sculpted his narcissism. He sculpted his refusal to change.
He sculpted the man's personality as much as his face.
And then the broadcast goes live on Fox. Millions of people are watching across the country. Down in Midlothian, Virginia, just outside Richmond, a woman named Wanda Flannery is sitting in her living room.
And she's just watching TV.
Yeah. She
Nah.
looks at the television screen, she listens to the story of the Westfield boogeyman, and then she looks at that clay bust with the jowls and the thick, outdated glasses, and she freezes
Oh, I bet.
because she realizes she is staring directly at the face of her former neighbor from Denver, a mild-mannered accountant she knew as Bob Clark.
It is one of the most incredible intersections of art, psychology, and forensic science in modern history.
Yeah.
It wasn't DNA evidence that broke the case. It wasn't high-tech surveillance, wiretaps, or a massive federal sting operation.
Yo.
It was an artist who deeply understood the arrogance and the unyielding rigidity of the criminal mind.
It is wild to think about Dolores, his new wife, during all of this. Imagine sitting on your couch watching TV and realizing the guy making tea in the kitchen, the guy you share a bank account with, murdered 5 people.
How did she not see any red flags for years? Well, it speaks to how effectively he wore the mask of the dutiful, boring husband. Dolores thought she was married to a quiet, dependable accountant. He was perfectly camouflaged by his own banality.
The tip is called in. The FBI swarms the Richmond accounting firm. But List has one final infuriating trick up his sleeve when they put the cuffs on him.
It's June 1st, 1989. The FBI agents walk into the accounting firm of Madrea, Joyner, Kirkham, and Woody in Richmond, Virginia. They navigate the cubicles and approach the desk of Robert P. Clark.
And how does he react?
When they arrest him, he exhibits absolute terrifying indifference. He doesn't panic. He doesn't run. He is completely contemptuous of the process.
They put him in custody, and for months, he outright denies being John Emile List.
He just plays dumb.
Yeah. He sits in a cell and insists with a straight face that he is Bob Clark and they have made a terrible mistake. He maintains the lie even as he is extradited from Virginia back to Union County, New Jersey.
He was clinging to the reality he had constructed. He had been Robert Clark for nearly as long as he had been a father. But the physical evidence was undeniable. Investigators needed scientific proof to shatter the alias in court.
So what do?
They dug into the archives. They finally pulled his military fingerprint records from his time serving in World War II and the Korean War.
How exactly did they match them back then? Was it all computerized?
Well, by 1990, the FBI had AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System, which digitized and compared minutia points. They took the fresh ink prints from Bob Clark and ran them against the historical military records of John List.
And it hit.
Oh yeah, the system flagged the similarities, and then a human fingerprint examiner visually confirmed the match, point by point. It was an irrefutable scientific match.
So the gig was finally up.
On February 16, 1990, faced with a definitive fingerprint match to his military records that completely shattered his alias, he finally confessed his true identity.
And then the trial kicks off in April 1990. And if you thought he might finally show some remorse after 19 years to reflect on shooting his children in the back of the head, you would be wrong.
Absolutely zero remorse.
He sits in that courtroom with no emotion whatsoever. His defense team tries to argue that he is unaccountable due to his mental state at the time. They blame the PTSD from his military service. They blame the intense financial stress of the 1970s economy. They blame his obsessive-compulsive personality disorder.
But the prosecution completely dismantles that narrative. They prove premeditation step by step.
They show the jury the canceled mail requests.
Exactly. They show the forged letters to the schools. They walk through the calculated, staggered timeline of the executions. They prove he didn't snap in a fugue state. He organized a massacre like a spreadsheet.
And he's convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. The sentencing is delivered by Judge William Wertheimer, and the judge delivers this absolutely scathing rebuke from the bench.
Oh, it was a powerful statement.
He looks right at List and says, John Emile List is without remorse and without honor. After 18 years, 5 months, and 22 days, it is now time for the voices of Helen, Alma, Patricia, Frederick, and John F. List to rise from the grave. He sentences him to 5 consecutive life terms, effectively 125 years behind bars.
He was never getting out. He spent the rest of his life in the New Jersey prison system. And bizarrely, he actually became somewhat of a celebrity among the inmates.
Wait, really?
Yeah, he spent his time reading religious texts, specifically finding solace in writings about spiritual detachment from suffering. Even in a concrete cell, he still believed he had done the right thing.
The tragic irony of this entire saga is staggering. He destroyed his entire bloodline, executed his own children, specifically to avoid the embarrassment of poverty and losing his social standing in a wealthy suburb.
And look what happened.
He died in 2008 of pneumonia in a prison hospital at age 82, completely disgraced, penniless, and remembered by history as nothing more than the boogeyman of Westfield.
And the physical legacy he left behind was erased as well. Breeze Knoll, the grand Victorian mansion where the blood was spilled, didn't survive either.
No, it didn't.
It eventually burned to the ground in an unsolved arson fire. Today, it is just an empty lot, a patch of grass that neighborhood kids actively avoid. The house is gone, the family is gone, and eventually the man himself faded away in a cage.
It forces us to confront a really uncomfortable reality. Liz spent 18 years as Robert Clark. He sat in church pews every Sunday, he shook hands with his neighbors, he coordinated carpools for the local kids.
He balanced the books for local businesses.
Exactly. He was woven into the fabric of a community that completely trusted him. It leaves us with this haunting question. How well do we actually know the quiet, mild-mannered people living right next door to us?
It is a terrifying thought to end on, but it is the absolute truth of this case. Sometimes the most dangerous people don't look like monsters. They look like accountants.
All right, if we made your drive, your workout, or your downtime even a little bit better today, do us a massive favor. Whether you are watching on YouTube, streaming on Spotify, listening on Apple Podcasts, or literally anywhere else, hit that follow or subscribe button right now. We drop episodes like this frequently, bringing you the most fascinating cases in the most interesting way possible. Lock in, because you do not want to miss the crazy mysteries we have queued up for next time. See you then.